I am Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus in Studio B here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called to Coach, recorded on October 9th, 2018. Called to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. On this special edition of Call to Coach, we'll spend time investigating the experience, emotion, and empirical aspects of each element of Gallup's Q12 engagement instrument to know how to use it to increase the power of our coaching. If you have questions during the webcast, we do have a chat room. It's available for you right below the main video. And if you just take a peek down there, if you're not logged into it or you've never done that before, there's a login button bottom left-hand corner. Choose that, click that, choose the guest account or any of the other social media. You can log in with Facebook or Google Plus or any of those, Twitter. If you want to do it that way, then and then put your name in where it says guest if you're choosing the guest account and hit submit and you'll join us in the chat room. They'll love to have your questions live as we're doing this. If you're listening to the recorded version of this and you have questions, you can send us an email, and really good for anything, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your CliftonStrengths coaching resources and training needs, and the new All 34 report, which comes in just 3 weeks. So excited about that. You can also catch the video and downloadable with streaming audio, and we call that podcasting, available for you on the blog as well. All the instructions on how to do it, head out to coaching.gallup.com. Mike McDonald is our host today. He works as a senior workplace consultant. Today on the campus of UNL. Mike, what the heck are you doing there today?
Yeah, well, what better place to have an opportunity to learn and grow, Jim, than to be on a university campus in that setting. So yeah, I just figured why not? Why not connect to the whole spirit of the item itself? But no, in all seriousness, Jim, it's a really exciting opportunity. We actually in part, Gallup is been kind of a partner, but supporting in a couple different ways, the CliftonStrengths Institute here at the University of Nebraska. And I know some of you in the audience have heard Mark Pogue join as a guest, Jim, with you in the past when he's been on and been able to speak to the implementation of strengths on a university campus. How does it actually logistically get rolled out in a way where it's involving student coaches to impact students of that campus to really grow and align their own strengths-based abilities with their academic success, their campus success, and into the intentional build out of a great career. So anyway, I've had the real fortune and privilege and benefit of actually being part of that effort this semester. And so schedules just aligned and created an opportunity for me to actually be here today for the podcast to really have a chance to be launched from here at the CliftonStrengths Institute at the University of Nebraska. So it's an awesome place. Unbelievable stories coming out of here. Jim, I know you've experienced them directly yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty great. We have that. We did an interview with Mark and his team back in, I think, in the spring of last year, I want to say, or something like that. I have to remember. Maybe it was a fall. If you go to our Call to Coach channel and you just Google that, Mark Pogue, you'll see our last interview with him. Some amazing things going on there. A legacy will be left. And I think, Mike, an example for what other schools could do if they really want to think about a strength-based organization, so to speak, if the organization is the college campus. I think a standard is being set there at UNL. And I think it's not as hard or not as expensive as people think it is.
No, yeah. that is true. Well, that's the beauty of strengths, right? I mean, not to overuse the word, but it's so scalable. And what I think we're seeing here, witnessing that's already been implemented, but experiencing personally is I'll tell you, Jim, we should talk about this more in a future podcast, but the power of strengths student coaches and the influence they're having when it's the right student coaches impacting other students. It's been unbelievable. Like I've seen a lot of great things that strengths have done. I've not seen anything more powerful or remarkable than this interaction.
Well, why don't we plan on Mike and you and Sam and Taylor on, maybe as we think about the winter, December timeframe, maybe as school is wrapping up, get you on a special edition and talk a little bit about where we're at and what we're doing and how that's working and how we've handled this fall and stuff like that. We didn't come here to talk about that. That's so right. let's get on Q12 as we think about, or the very last question. And some folks have been wondering what the wrap will be like. Next week, we'll take a look at reporting and in the business center how to actually do this. So we give some screenshots and some look at the reports and how it looks. And I use it for all my college students. So we'll actually look at some real data when we do that. So that's coming up next week. But for this week, Mike, in the last year, I've had an opportunity to work to learn and grow. We call this the learn and grow question. If you're at Gallup and people are saying, Q12 learn and grow, that's what we say a lot of. Let's dig into it, talk a little bit about what it is. And let's first, we've got some resources. What's this coming out of? And one more walk through our resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll end the way we started, right? Always referencing our First Break All the Rules book. New York Times bestseller, landmark resource that really helps bring the best of our understanding about engagement to life. And again, we've been really trying to accentuate the two features. Inside the book, the current edition, make sure you have the current edition, there's a Strengths Finder code. There's also a code for Q12 for up to 10 associates to take the Q12, and really encouraging everybody that in one stop, one shopping point, you can actually have a product where you can bring the connection between a leadership self-awareness around strengths to driving performance through their team and the engagement of their team, and really making the introduction and the connection formally that way. So great resource for all of us to have at our disposal. We'll be referencing as another feature to that resource mindset, one of our books called 12, The Elements of Great Managing, which takes the nuance, the qualitative expression of each element out, really blows it out in a way where we have living, breathing case studies from around the planet that help us understand the range and the diversity of each of these items in a really powerful way that I think helps not only us connect those stories to what we're trying to understand as coaches, but also to help those stories connect to our clients, right, in a way that they can see the possibilities within them. And then we're always, Jim, really trying to make sure that our credibility around the experiential, the emotional, and the empirical is brought out in our own reports, right? And so we've got our millennial report, our re-engineering performance management report, our women in the workplace report, and really just a broad invitation that as great coaches, as consultants of engagement, when we're working with leaders or teams, that we're accessing and building out empirical cases of understanding about how this isn't about engagement and it's not about strengths. It's about doing something better than we did before. And the metrics around these, the use of these resources really, I think, helps set expectations, but also the delivery on those expectations and what that looks like when we do it well. So we want to integrate all of those things into our own capacity and our own expertise.
Mike, we're going to spend a little time later in the year, early next year, kind of looking at these reports, do kind of a little breakdown for you on, as coaches, how you use these reports. So that will be coming. You'll want to kind of watch first of the year or watch towards the end of the year as we kind of break those down. As we've been covering them, there's so much good data in them. I thought it'd be great to maybe spend 35, 40 minutes looking at each one and giving you guys some indications on how to use them. Okay. In the last year, I've had the opportunity at work to learn and grow. Mike, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the item itself, again, like all the rest, very specifically constructed, right? No mistake about what it represents and the words that are specifically used. So this last year, so think about the time frame, I have had opportunities at work to learn and grow. And really, Jim, the request inside that, as we've discussed with all the others, is for us as associates or members of that organization, we want to be challenged. So the request of our team leader, of our team, of our organization is challenge me. And as human beings, we just have an opposition and a discomfort with feeling like we're stuck. And what this item really helps us have a perspective about, or an expectation about, is we better not be stuck. If we ever feel like we're stuck, there's going to be a lot of different effects on our engagement level behind that mindset and that space. And so it has as much futuristic and horizon level perspective about it as any of the 12 items. First off, you can see that in the language about the past year, but also what it represents. And I think there's a lot of congruence between hope or future, or even these opportunities to learn and grow. Not just have I had them, but what am I going to have in anticipation on the other side? What's this next year going to look like? And so as human beings, we see it, right? We see that there's a natural progression even through each of the 12 elements. And there's a reason why this is 12 out of the 12. So an important perspective is for us to have. I think, Jim, sometimes we think about that question. And again, as I think about the alignment with hope, are your best days ahead of you? or behind you? And I think as leaders and as coaches, as we're coaching leaders, how do they stay out in front to continually cast the picture, the future, the vision of what that horizon is that we want to be moving towards in a way that we're certainly not feeling stuck. So it's as much of a perspective and a position, but how does the conversation that we have in our coaching align to help create that aspirational state and coming back in the involvement and the application of our abilities to make it a reality?
Michael, you mentioned that kind of that word hope, and it's showing up a lot more in the second half, I think, than we talked about it in the first half. And can you dig in on that a little bit? Because why is that? I mean, why is this idea of hope? We spend a lot of time talking about hope for our our K-12 work and sometimes in our college work. We don't see that word hope show up as much at the at the work level, and yet it still needs to. So can you tie that word just in a little bit more and talk a little bit why it's so important that employees have this idea of hope?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Jim, when we talk about engagement, that we're talking about the translation or the conversion of emotion into performance, and not as a manipulation, but out of a redemption, right? That we are, as human beings, emotional creatures, and relationships have impact on us emotionally. Self-esteem that's driven by valuable, important work, how we're considered as contributors to our workplace. All of those things stir us emotionally in as by our measurements, maybe as powerful ways as many others. And I think that in the space of the workplace, that hope is just an uncomfortable word, because I think we've misassigned it to everywhere else. Like hope is something that maybe we experience in a family, or experience with a loved one, or with a significant other. And when we start to, there's been a traditional separation and distance between emotion in the workplace, and certainly when you bring in words that represent those extremes like love or even best friend. I think that's why it's so controversial and what's represented in that relationship. And hope, I think, kind of fits into that, where it's just uncomfortable. We just don't talk about hope in the workplace in a way that we've made sense out of yet. But Jim, but hope, when we think about how it represents powerful performance for each one of us for all the right reasons, is an unbelievable force to be reckoned with. And if we're smart, if we're really operating in engagement at the highest order, we would know and understand what hope represents, and we would absolutely be creating that, I think, in the eyes and the daily experience of the people that we work with. Now, what does hope actually mean? Again, if we break it down and start to understand what it represents, when we think about the spirit and what's represented for engagement being that voluntary discretionary effort. You guys, it'd be a drinking game right now at this point for how many times we've said voluntary and discretionary effort. But think about what hope represents in that ability to volunteer our effort, to extend our discretionary effort in a way that is meaningful and matters. And so here's an example. If I have hope and I have this futuristic perspective about an opportunity to learn and grow and a horizon that I'm moving towards, sometimes that growth rate is faster, sometimes it's slower. But if I have hope, I can delay my gratification because I can see this vivid picture in front of me. As a team leader, you created such a clarity about who I'm going to be and where we're going to be and how we can do that on purpose, that I can delay gratification. I can have a resiliency about extending myself into realizing what that hope can be through coaching, through measurement. And think about all the ways now that not just emotionally or aspirationally we can create what this picture looks like, but we can actually manufacture it step by step as we assemble those first items of engagement along the way. Think about my opportunities to learn and grow and the claim I can make and what they could be and how much hope I have if I have a clarity about knowing what's expected of me at work today. If I know that my supervisor or someone at work cares about me as a person, that I have an intact group around me that is cheering for me if I succeed, if I learn and grow as a person, if I'm not stuck and I realize what that future state might be. So I love to think about what each of those items, as transactionally as they might appear on the surface, as relationally as they might appear on the surface, but what are each of those 11 that precede 12? How do they represent hope in the experience of the associate in a way that we're moving forward in such a powerful and vivid way. And not just moving forward ourselves, but there's a contagious net that brings all of us along with it. And so there's more to the story about the collective we that's represented in that. But Jim, I love the fact, and you can tell by my response, I love the fact that you asked about hope in the workplace, because I think sometimes we're like, no, hope belongs on the front of a Hallmark card, but it certainly doesn't, it shouldn't be represented, or shouldn't be anything that we're mindful of activating daily in our workplace.
And sometimes we combine the word faith and hope together, where hope becomes a magical idea, and it's not. It is really this emotional position of, in people who come to work have a hope, especially in this context, that today can be different than yesterday. Today can be better than yesterday. I think sometimes when we think about learning and growing, we also think we focus, or we see the word learn, and so we start thinking about, okay, I need to be taking a college course at night, or when was the last time I went to a conference and learned something? And yet fundamentally, Mike, when we think about this learning and growing really starts on a daily basis on what is my role, and is it getting any different? Like, is it getting better each day? When we look at this, can you talk a little bit about how this starts in the team, or how this starts with the individual at work, more than just a learning opportunity, but in this growing of getting better? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the trapdoor, Jim, and you nailed it, is the trapdoor that a lot of organizations, in a very well-intended fashion, fall into, is that they think that this is a training, or it's a formal educational process that they take associates through. And that's not to say that it's not that. It's just typically not only that. And so when you think about what's represented behind, again, the request to challenge me, that means that there's very, very diverse interpretations of what learning and growth actually represent for each individual. So it gets back down to the individual level of coaching that's required, but also that trap door is that most companies think that their recipe for success around that item is, well, we'll just implement more training, or we'll offer tuition reimbursement for people to go back and get formally involved in a degree or a certification that will represent an outcome of learning and growth. And actually, quite frankly, it's as fundamental for a lot of people as just finding new and more efficient ways to do their job. And one of the things that's really powerful and important when we think about engagement is, for all of us, we have a range, and you hear these terms, of intrapreneurial ability or entrepreneurial mindsets. And so much of engagement really is about putting each of us in a space of influence and control over the outcomes of our own jobs. Well, when we take opportunity to learn and grow, back down, Jim, to your point, to other inroads or other pragmatic opportunities, where for me, learning and growth is just, Jim, just think about the evolution, Jim, of your podcasts and the way you've expanded the constituency, the range of people that you've had as hosts, the range of people you've had as guests, the range of people and what they represent from subject matter expertise. That's a great example of learning and growth. And think about how that's had to stretch and bring you along in ways that were, I would hope, activating and engaging for you, as you think about not only where have you come and where are you at now, but where is this going to continue to go? So at the beginning of the show, you were already talking about, hey, we're going to have some upcoming episodes, and you're almost ideating out loud, but you're learning and growing in the process. We're talking about, maybe we'll have a series around what's happening around CliftonStrengths on campus. Maybe we'll have a series about what's happening as we really highlight and feature women in the workplace, millennials in the workplace, re-engineering performance management. And it's what you just represented for all of us, Jim, I would contend, is that actual item on display right before our very eyes. And I think when people are aligned around what they do well, opportunity to do what I do best every day, then they have a real sense of what learning and growing can look like. And for some of us, it's a strengths-based explanation where maybe we're learner, input, focus achiever, and we like to get a PhD. For some of us, it's activator, achiever, and learner, and we like to learn by getting things done. Whatever those stylistic learning preferences might be, we have a coaching space and a multitude of interpretations that allow us to actually deliver on that item in a way that's real. But I'm glad you brought us back to the point that for a lot of us, it's the learning and growth around, can I do my job better? I think I've got some ideas about how to do it better. I'd love to stretch and grow within my role by doing my job better.
Yeah, everybody wants to make a difference, right? And everybody wants to have an impact. And when we wake up in the morning realizing the day could be better than yesterday, because I can implement a new process, I can use a new tool, I can learn something new. You mentioned it for me. almost now 2 or 3 days a week, I'm spending an hour learning along with you. Like, I mean, I have learned an enormous amount through this Q12 series, right? It gives me an opportunity to learn and grow. And so it changes things, right? It begins to change. It can think about changing a team dynamic. What happens, Mike, when we get this question right? We've been building through the season on this. Each one of these questions we've been building. And when we get this question right, what kind of things happen in our organization? What kind of results do we start seeing when that happens?
Yeah, you know what? Where we get into the emotional effect at the team level and the organization level, if we think about the cultural impact that's represented behind this item, there is a fearlessness that's driven out of our natural curiosity. And I would contend that we're no longer playing not to lose, but we actually are starting to play now to actually win, to take chances, to risk on what might be, who we might be as we ask questions about answers that are represented in that opportunity to learn and grow. And I love the contagious effect of that fearlessness throughout a team and a culture when we release it in the right way, because now all of a sudden our risk tolerance really gets built up because we've got this foundation of engagement underneath us. For those of us, if we do it well, we've got strengths and engagement as a foundation underneath us. And so now when we start to ask very different questions based on who we could be, we're willing to extend ourselves and quote unquote, maybe risk a little bit more than what we might have been. And so you see discovery, you see performance, you see all sorts of impact happen out of that appetite where we can let go of risk and move fear out of the equation and actually start to invite and provoke this spirit of curiosity and discovery and what if. And it doesn't just stay within ourselves, right, Jim? It's just as much as engagement. That attitude, when we lead through that lens of curiosity that's represented by this item, that attitude is pervasive. And so when we are around people who have a fearlessness about their own approach, not so surprisingly, it's contagious in terms of how it amplifies our own abilities to step out in ways that we might not be comfortable for. And so I love the tone that it sets as a statement, but also the outcomes on the other side, that we won't be scared to get better. And that we can convert. I think what's really powerful about this item is it converts failure, if you want to call it that, or attempt into a part of the learning process that we can still advance and claim ground from, rather than be scared from an attempt that we tried that didn't work out as well as we thought it would be. And we just run away from it and we never make that attempt again, or convert it into a learning opportunity that takes us closer to that outcome.
Mike, Lisa asks an interesting question in the chat room, and I'm not exactly sure where we're going with it, so maybe you can help me out. So she says, we're using the language of in your job, but is this about more than just a specific job description? I have the opportunity to learn and grow in this work environment, sometimes in ways beyond what I'm expected to do. So are we, as we think about, well, it's really not how, to be honest, it's not how we think about this, right? The magic in questions like this come during feedback sessions, when you get the opportunity to get some kind of score back and then begin to ask individual questions. Because we get this all the time. I get this all the time as a manager. I may have two people who saw the question differently. And oftentimes we have to ask, how did you interpret that question? Right? And so some may say, yeah, I'm seeing this in my own specific job skill, job description, and what I'm doing. Others may see it as the opportunities the company gives me as a whole to learn and grow. Can you kind of address that a little bit?
Yeah. So first and foremost, Jim, you're obviously right. I mean, I think one of the mistakes that we all might make, and certainly can help our clients not make, is you can never get past the individual conversation right around each of these elements. There's never going to be a more productive question than asking somebody, what does this item mean to you and why? And so I think that's obviously the starting point. But what's really interesting to me, if we take this all the way back out, Jim, to some of the dominant trends that we're seeing in the workplace right now, I think what's represented in this question, even though it says opportunities at work, think about the translation or the transition of the world and the workplace that's happening right in front of our very eyes. And so it used to be, there was a traditional sense that what we identified with in our employment was just job, right? What am I paid to do? What am I expected to do? And that was my singular interpretation. But now it's not just job, it's life. And never before have we been more aware, and certainly has there never been more intentionality or a demand for the integration of me not just doing what I do because it's my job, but how does my job actually explain my world or my life? And I think to your point, Jim, is if we approach this question the right way, we don't limit it to the workplace or job, because quite frankly, our whole job request or demand is not limited. And so we have to start thinking about, and I think you see the highest order of this element start to show itself when people think about community well-being and how well is the workplace giving opportunities for us to be better members of our community. And maybe that's a formal sponsorship and relationship that they have with community groups and philanthropies that we're involved with, where we get to extend ourselves and feel that growth in the community and the alignment with our career. Maybe for others, Jim, we see it on out here on campus, right? I'll use a convenient example. Our Gallup Purdue Index, our strata research shows that when students have the opportunity to learn and grow, not within the formal structure and semester of a class, but when they can learn things and take them out into the marketplace, where they get to apply what they've learned in a job or an internship, there's a multiplier effect in terms of its prediction and ability to forecast their success in a career that comes from the integration of those experiences. And so I love the fact, by the question, that we move out of any trap of a traditional sense of my job limitation and interpretation of this item, and start to think about where else is there an integration of how I am or who I am at work with community, with family, with classroom, wherever that integration happens or occurs. It's much more big and broad. And I think if we do it well, we apply a couple different layers to it and not just that singular lens.
I think of a specific example like teammates here in Nebraska. We have a mentoring program that it's not a part of our organization. Gallup, we're very close to it, but not a mandatory thing, not something, we give employees the opportunity to, and it's a mentoring program, right? We've had Called the Coaches with that team on here before. If you just go back and search teammates, if you want to see those Called the Coaches where we've talked about it. But a mentoring relationship may give someone in the workplace the opportunity to grow in ways they wouldn't get in the workplace. But it's still, and we say work-life integration here at Gallup, and that's really one of these areas where this really shines, because an employee may get an opportunity to grow outside of themselves, see something different, or give them perspective that they would never get if it was just a head down work environment. And yet one has an effect on the other. They don't live in a silo, right? I have this mentoring relationship that I go to on Thursdays to meet with this fifth grader for lunch, and I get an opportunity of mission and purpose, and my employer allows that support to happen, right? And so it gives us but you won't get that out of just the question. You're going to have to dig a little bit, right? We're going to have to get managers to dig. What is providing that purpose, and how are we supporting that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the, I'll call it, for lack of a better frame of reference, that's where I think we need to become much more active in our leadership. And I think it's why this one gets challenged as much as any, is the fact that we don't necessarily feel the conversion of this on a daily basis in the way that we need to work to construct or manufacture. So we have to have active conversations around this particular element, because the challenge is, how do we then bring it to a daily experience and delivery, right? So it's past year opportunities to work, to learn and grow can feel as vague and as nebulous and ambiguous on its own as maybe any of the 12. The conversation matters, because we have to have that interpretation in order to really take this down into, so Jim, what does that mean for you today? What does opportunity to work and grow look like for you today? What are the days in the previous 365 that you could say, yes, you've had that opportunity and that was a 5 for you? So that's where it becomes, I think, so difficult in that initiate versus react and respond mode for a team leader, is that this won't be a request made by us as associates that we will so superficially or on the surface see the immediate impact on a deliverable, the immediate daily impact on an outcome. This is one of those more broad, I guess, perspectives about delivery that really requires a lot of intentionality. And so when we think about a team leader in the conversion of just being a boss, not just being a boss where it's all about corrective action, but being a coach. This is where we start to look at, hey, what's your training program going to be, right? What, as an athlete, right? If we think about the metaphor played out, where do you need to train? What do you need to do? What's the performance that we could accomplish that will be something we've never seen before, and it's uniquely constructed to you, and helps us win as a result. But it's definitely going to require, you'll see a separation of the best managers to those who just simply get the job done in a specific space and time. You'll see that separate out with this item particularly, and others who are, items 10, 11, and 12 start to get into that. I guess I call it higher order of engagement leadership.
Yeah, and maybe harder in some regards, or maybe more open-ended in the sense of, and maybe more open to interpretation. Mm-hmm. And so, as we think about a coach working with a leader, that's, we've been encouraging that the entire season as we put this together, as you as a coach working with a leader and helping them understand as a manager roles and responsibilities. This is one of those questions where I think we've really got to spend some time understanding the team, the individual's needs, and where are they today? What do they need in order to feel like they're learning and growing in their role, whether that's specific to the role itself, or specific to the team itself, or specific to the organization itself. These questions all get asked. Elisa out there in the chat room is talking about, she likes to have, before folks are taking the Q12, have some of these interpretation questions in advance. I kind of like it being open, because I love to get the teams together and say, I don't know, what were you thinking? Because that conversation is more important than the score in some regards, especially in this one. In particular, I think in the team hearing these conversations, and yet maybe a conversation that happens in a quick connect, or even in a developmental review, when we start thinking about, hey, what did you, and this is a great developmental review question to just ask, what have you, how are you feeling about your growth? What are you learning? What kind of new things? What do you need in that area? And coaches, you have the opportunity to have these leaders, to bring these leaders to the spot where they're able to ask these questions.
Mm-hmm. That's a great coaching question, Jim. I love I love asking, what's the most important thing you've learned in the last month? And then what's really great about that is, to your point about the team perspective, is if you accumulate each individual's answers to that, I want to make those the worst kept secrets in the world, right? Like, I want to make sure, Jim, if you learned something really powerful and important in the last month, we need to make sure there's at least 10 other people that know what it was you learned, and that they're able to put it to work, and vice versa, right? So you kind of create this network of cross-pollination where now it's mutual, it's collaborative, and we're all putting the best of our discoveries at the center of the table for each other to share in. So it's a great tone, but I just think it's a great question, because I think it sets the expectation we should be learning. I mean, if somebody says, yeah, I don't think I learned anything all that amazing in the last month, or the answer is legitimately, yeah, I didn't learn anything in the last month, then that's a nice call to action, right? That helps us materialize answers in authentic ways much more actively than before. So I think that's a great question. So it's one of those normalized questions that takes this item on into just the way we do work and our culture of expectation around it.
Mike, in our high school internship program, we've changed the way we teach this year to go from being very prescriptive. In other words, we were starting with a 6-week, here is a technology we want you to learn. We're going to teach it to you in a lecture format, and you're going to get an hour with some exercises, and then we're going to develop some things around it. As we've sensed the changes that are going on with the millennials, and I'm really working with post-millennials at this point. These students they don't fall into the millennial generation. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. But we've begun going to a process of saying, here's a problem. Let's find some ways to solve it. And then let's work through learning opportunities that are very specific to what you're trying to do and at the level that you're at. This generation loves that, to be honest. They've embraced it without fear. They're the YouTube, they learn at the University of YouTube, and have figured out, right, they can learn anything on YouTube. And it's a different, I think if you would ask them, we were getting some feedback from them early on, like, yeah, this lecture kind of seems stifling. Like, it was okay, but I didn't get to lead the conversation, or it wasn't really working for me. The feedback so far has been, well, like, yeah, why wouldn't we do it this way? Like, which is awesome, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't know that if we weren't asking the questions. We kind of, in the feedback that we get from them as we spent some time talking to them, that is kind of the feedback that we got. We know some other things, like this learn and grow question is really important to this millennial generation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, I'd love to. Our data just screams out the demand, particularly represented by some of our newer generations in the workplace. But I agree with you, Jim. Like, there's times I think for all of us, we should be looking at this item, and I don't think the lens of our perspective around our generation matters as much as we want to give it credit for. It's an engagement thing more than it is an actual generational thing. I want to make sure that we have a clarity about that if we're really paying attention to the cart behind the horse, that we've got those things in alignment. But I do love, and man, do I appreciate some of the newer generations into the workforce for the call to action they've really created, I think, for the world to sit up and pay attention to the fact that development matters. And I think they become such standard bearers for that reality that I actually genuinely appreciate just what's represented on the other side. And I love the fact that our data is starting to catch up to these generational insights and requests that I think not only represent detail and specificity within a generational mindset, but also across fundamentally for all of us. So one of the stories that really came out of our millennial study and research is the fact that when we look across organizations at large, that engagement actually it does drop with tenure typically, right? But not any more so for any other generations, and maybe even more so for the millennials specifically. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe it's because millennials just happen to be the newest addition or contribution to the workforce. There's a lot of debate and examination around what is happening. Is it a generational thing, or is it a career tenure thing? What's going on there in that story? Nonetheless, the millennials help us take us to another level of understanding. Role clarity does improve with tenure, other items around recognition, but particularly, Jim, to your point, development. And so when we see in the millennial generation, which by 2020 is going to make up 70% of the workplace, 99% of millennials say that opportunity to learn and grow is 59%. I need to take a different angle on this. 59% say that it's extremely important. So 60% of that population isn't qualifying their answer. They're singularly and in a polarizing fashion saying that it's extremely important. So we can't miss it, right? So there's a demand there that's really loud. Even more, expanded around that perspective. When we think about the strategy of learning and growth for that future workforce, 87% of millennials would rate professional or career growth and development as important to them in a job. So think about how we're attracting and keeping millennials in our messaging and our mission around our workplace. And 68% of millennials have said that they strongly agree that they've had opportunities to work and grow in the past year. 60% of those who say they can strongly agree that they have an opportunity to learn and grow in the past year actually plan to be with our organization 1 year from now. So incredibly important, Jim, because quite frankly, our millennials, for reasons that we've discussed along the way, are much more open to consideration to move, much more open to other job opportunities, and not just across the hall within our organizations, but around the planet. And what they see even around the globe, right, as different opportunities to learn and grow. So the appetite for human development, we would contend, has maybe never been higher, and it's probably not represented in a more polarizing fashion than it is with the requests that are made from our own millennial population.
Mike, from the data that we have pulled, we've got some recommendations, ways to challenge these employees. It's not difficult, by the way. I think this is one of these things that's pretty natural for most people as you're working with individuals. But what do we say? What kind of prescription would we write here for leaders, for managers working in really handling or addressing these, both at the team and the individual level?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I think challenges us is to make sure that learning is seen as a continuous expectation and has a cycle to it that perpetuates itself. And so how do we build that out? So the first thing we have to know is that there's a call to action or a demand around the fact that it does have to be continuous. I think there can be, and oftentimes there are, static deliveries where we started here and then we ended there. And then we kind of pause, maybe too long, maybe forever, and we don't add another chapter of what that looks like, or we don't loop learning together in a way that that as we come in for the conclusion of one phase of learning, that part of the conclusion of that phase is the renewal of a different phase that's attached onto the other side of it. So there is a futuristic initiating perspective for us as team leaders that we can never come from behind on this. We have to stay out in front of this side in particular if we manage it well. It has to be expanding too. We had a great conversation at the beginning of our call, but it has to incorporate everything that can contribute to what learning and growth actually looks like. And again, that comes back down to that individual well of perspective. And so it's understanding who that person is motivationally and as a talent predisposition, but how do we convert that to aspirationally who they could be? And always having that conversation where there's always something out in front of us that's pulling us forward rather than pushing us. And so that's going to be an important thing, that it has to be aligned with who we are motivationally and who we are from our own strengths perspective. And I think this, Jim, if we do it right, this is where the conversations and the tones should really start to separate, where it's not just a job, but this now has become a career. And even the perspectives represented by both of those points of reference is, you can see the longevity, that future horizon represented in career, to job, which is checking off boxes, doing what I need to do today so that I don't just get fired. And there's a very different outcome and expectation on the other side of that. So managers matter, Jim. Managers have to help make that conversion and create those conversations with that futuristic tone and perspective.
Any advice, Mike, you'd give to those managers as we think about some questions they could be asking?
Yeah, there is. When we've looked at the best, it's really interesting. Some of the things that people, again, in well-intended deliveries that fell short. First and foremost, one that I think is one for us to keep our eye on is that they've set up the learning and development opportunity to be one that only involves that person by themselves. So it'll be a certification program, or it'll be a project, or what have you. And the miss there is that so for the learning and growing opportunity, it was, hey, Mike, you said that you would love to do this. Yep, that sounds great to me. Perfect. Go do that. And we didn't think about the fact that there might be somebody else that Mike either knows or hasn't met yet who would also like to work on that project. And what would happen if we combined the relational aspect of Mike and Jim working on that project together? And now how does that start to become more meaningful? It's relational. They find an energy about their learning and growth that's different and better because they're doing it at least with one other person along the way. And so one of our best practice insights is making sure that learning and growing happens with another person or with other people, not isolated, not compartmentalized in its delivery. And boy, that's an easy one to miss. I think the other thing too is allowing people to co-create what that learning and growing plan might look like to them. And you'll see some people based on their strengths, predisposition, or their mindset, for some people, they want to make big, bold claims, but then they may not have the supporting ability to break that down into deliverables. Some people really like the bite-sized deliverable piece, but might miss the mark in terms of the overall picture. And so that's where that complementary nature of these dynamic relationships really come to play in and reinforce each other. And so now, yes, we're learning and growing, but now there's performance outcomes that are happening along the way because we're getting work done in a way that's different and better than we were able to before. So I think those are two on the surface that really work well. And then the third one I think is not just asking people what the most important thing they've learned is, but who are the people that they're learning from. And when you can think about building out a learning network, not just from content, not just from opportunity, but how do you arrange and structure those natural mentors and teachers to create a circuit board of living, breathing, learning touch points that activate that learning curiosity for all of us. It's a great way for you as a team leader then to not become that answer to all of the learning and growth questions that your team has, but now you created a mutual collaborative spirit across your team where who are the best people to learn from and what are the best subjects that they know about that cause us to learn and grow and take us on into a really bright future as a result.
Mike, that's so important that we don't create a bottleneck of learning. Sometimes we may approach this as the manager becomes the vending machine of learning and growth. Hey, I need something, I'm going to put $1 in and then push a few buttons and out it comes. And you just really talked about the team. We've been spending a lot of time in the chat room talking about the individual, the one-on-one conversation, but it can be amplified in a team setting. And this is where I think it's important that the team has an environment. You mentioned this here in a second, that there's an environment of learning and growing within the team context, and that the manager makes that okay. They can learn from others. The manager does not have to be the center of truth. Not everything needs to be checked or run by. Not all learning has to happen there. And you said the M word, which is mentoring, right? And we often miss that big deal in our Gallup Purdue Index, this mentoring concept. And we often miss the power of mentoring at the team level. In other words, do I have a mentor? Am I encouraging mentoring relationships to happen naturally or even in an organized way to allow for some of that knowledge to pass down? And as a leader, you get an opportunity to maybe even do that intentionally, but it looks like it's happening organically. Yeah. And so to pass that organizational knowledge down or through where people get to understand what the future could look like for them in 5 to 10 years in the organization from someone who's there today, right?
Yeah.
And so let's not miss that. This is how it works on a team. Yes, the one-on-one conversations and but I think it gets amplified, or the exponential power of it happens when it happens in a team context, intentionally and sometimes by accident.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love it. Like we talk about this, right? These aren't, they shouldn't be items. We don't want them to be elements. These are, we should, in our own experience and help the leaders we're working with, make very formal associations. When we think of opportunities to learn and grow, who are the people that you associate with bringing out the best of that item? Who are those natural teachers? Who are those natural mentors? How do we assign names and faces to that item, to that expectation, in a way that brings our whole culture to life? And now we know what that item looks like. We know who that item is. And when we think about the really prevailing outcome that we're trying to drive towards, which is normalization, boy, when the expectation of that item is delivered through my association with another person, that's a fantastic experience. It's a fantastic way to build out a culture. And I really love the fact, Jim, that I think for a lot of these natural mentors and teachers, sometimes we're not able to find really, really defined spots for them or a claim where they really make that unique and powerful contribution. And I love the fact that as we really organize our teams in a best practice fashion, we can call out those fantastic world-class teachers within a role and activate and position them in a way that's great for them, but also great for us, all wrapped around the experience that's polarized and brought to a center of attention by item number 12.
Our webcast infrastructure is a Q12 question, learning and growing, right? As a manager, and I was looking at the coaching community, it was important to me that we had ways for the coaches to learn and grow. And that's not just on the webcast, but through written material, through mentoring relationships. But for me in particular, Mike, the mentoring that you do for me, that Micah does for me, that Dean does for me, that our coaches do. We had a great conversation out of Sydney last night talking about strengths from a scientific perspective, which was really, really interesting, right? For me, that gives me the opportunity to learn and grow. For me, I'm surrounding myself with the smartest people that I know, and then I get to learn these things. Now, whether it sticks is it's a whole other question. But Mike, we even as managers, we get the opportunity. We should continually be surrounding ourselves. We piloted that coach boss to coach course last week that I got to be a part of. And sometimes even as leaders and coaches, you need to coach your leaders that it's not always just about their team, but they need to surround themselves in their peer group, right? And be learning and growing themselves from among their peers. That's what I do with you guys. You and Micah, I just steal all the smart stuff that you have a PhD, Mike. I'm just stealing that from you every single week. It's pretty awesome.
Jim, I can spell PhD, and then we'll go from there. That's where I start. But I do think you're right, and we hear this a lot. But I think there is a reality to it that I think Strengths gives us such an advantage to, where we hear a lot about a leadership demand about the ability to be curious and to learn, and to bring your team along through the energy that's represented in there. And I love the fact that with 34 strengths, we can think about the range and diversity of how people learn. And Jim, I love our leaders at Gallup, but the range of the way they like to learn, ranging from the very formal and traditional to the experiential, hey, I'm in the middle of a big picture organization level challenge and opportunity. They learn really great in the middle of that. There's an infinite range in that I think is represented, not just for leaders, but then I think it helps them open up the window of possibility. We're like, oh, if it's 1 in 33 million is the odds of us having the same top 5 in the same order, maybe there's some diversity in our approach and expectations of how different people learn differently as well, which just brings it back down to where I think coaches have such an advantage. It's about asking questions, right? Opportunities to learn and grow. What's the most important question for our career and our learning and growing that we would love to have answered that takes us forward?
Mike, we have some prescriptive best practices that as we kind of think about wrapping this up here to give individuals, coaches, listen carefully. And I think this is an opportunity to build these into the leaders, to the managers that you're coaching.
Yeah, I'll tiptoe through these rather quickly, Jim, but I think I touched on some of these earlier. If you really hone these down to an important list that I think we can keep our eye on, if we take this item to the individual level, there's about 6 or 7 things here to pay attention to. First off, you have to invest the time. And this is where managers and leaders get challenged, is the ever-present enemy of time. So we've got to help them have accountability where they push back against the demands of the day and think about how do they get out in front of their teams and their individuals with a learning and growing future. Okay, so they've got to commit and invest. They need to involve their team in what the interpretation looks like for not just learning things, but there should be an accountability about, if we learn this, how does our performance improve? If we improve our performance, what did we learn from it, in a way that those two are playing against each other constantly to promote each other. We obviously know we've got to be thinking about an individualized approach where we're considering unique strengths, relationships as we match people together to learn from each other. Create those personalized development paths. There's so many coaching touch points. They should all align. Jim, when we think about the 5 conversations in our re-engineering performance management paper, I would encourage all of you to read that paper, take a look at the 5 conversations, and think about how you can help a client architect a learning and growing framework represented by each of those coaching conversations. Second to last here, we have the ever increasing audit mentality. If you were to sit down and look at the potential opportunities within an employee's job, where are those that show themselves to present the most learning and growth opportunities aligned with a performance need that the team has requested, the organization has requested, problem solving that's targeted through that opportunity to learn and grow. And then last but not least, great leaders are fantastic in their unique contribution about helping a person see their potential, maybe beyond their own standpoint, their own view of themselves. And this is where I think the best leaders, the mirror they hold up is the cleanest and most clear that a person can see who they might be in the future, where they might grow in the future. And so there's a great dynamic there. There's a great tension that the best leaders produce when they say, hey, I think you could actually, I love your goal. I actually think you could do even more, and not out of manipulation, but out of mission, right? Where I think you have greater capacity. And then what you see in that is a statement of confidence and belief, but also a buy-in where if my team leader says that about me, they're bought into my success. So that becomes a really important part of that support and that success is represented by item number 12.
All right, Mike, we did it. We got through all 12 questions and some great resources. If you just joined us for the 12th question, you've got some homework to do. You have 11 hours of work, some homework to go back and listen. Mike, as we wrap it up, we've got some things to encourage folks. We've got some resources available, some courses that would be available. Let's talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, absolutely. So we would just encourage all of you, You're subject matter experts. You're great coaches. You're great consultants. Continue your own journey of learning and growth opportunities. Think about how do you integrate these resources, not just the content that Jim and I have referenced, but also the learning experience that are represented. So a couple of classes that we would really encourage you to consider if your schedules and the times line up. But first off, our Engagement Champions course. It's a 2-day course, and it really helps you to integrate the science, the research of engagement, the diagnostics of engagement, but even the coaching and consulting around engagement as you lead teams, team leaders, and organizations on into an understanding of engagement, but into an application that moves our culture forward collectively. One of our flagship courses is Leading High-Performing Teams. This is a great way for you to get yourself into the space and the mindset of what it means to be a manager. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities for success? When we think about strengths of a manager, strengths from a team perspective, all leading performance through that engagement focus. Great way for you to understand exactly what that world looks like and feels like so that you can coach to it specifically. And the resources from both Engagement and Champions and Leading High-Performing Teams are incredibly valuable for you as you continue to build out your consulting. And then certainly last but not least, our Engagement Starter Pack. So if you don't have the schedule that lines up to take either one of those previous 2 courses, buy the Starter Pack. Get inside the information, the content there. It has the new copy of First Break All the Rules. It has a Creating an Engaging Manager work packet so that you can help managers think about how they bring engagement to a daily delivery. And then all around questions and cards. So there's engagement discussion cards, there's manager discussion cards, things where you can equip a manager with really great questions to bring out the best of engagement for their teams on the other side. So really encourage you to just bring all that together in the best of your consulting and coaching.
Lisa in the chat room says it kills her that life is such that she missed the other episodes. You can go back and Lisa, you can go back and watch all those. We record them available. I know she knows that, but they're available for you out there as well. And then a reminder, if you go to shop.gallup.com right now, so it's October 9th, 2018. May not be there if you're listening to this later, but the digital Leading High Performance Teams kit is available for you on the very front page right now. If you just head out there, if it's not, just search for it. Super easy to find. And if you can't make the training, the kit is kind of the next best thing to be in there. Don't underestimate the power of coming to a site, taking a couple days of training and getting that done. Pretty amazing. Many of our coaches have done that as well. Great opportunity for you. Do not underestimate that. But if you can't just do that, we've got some resources that you can purchase. Get that done as well. Some great material. Mike, next week, we're going to cover the nuts and bolts. We're kind of down to how you do this. What's the experience look like? We'll show some screenshots. We'll show some reports. I will show you my dashboard as I have done this now, I think 5 or 6 times with some students, both here in Nebraska as well as at the University of Maryland. Excited to show some of those. There's no personal information in that, right? So those are just teams. You can't find any of that stuff on there. And so we'll give you a kind of a real world example and talk a little bit about how I've been managing those teams and what those things mean to me, how we're using it in our context of a college course, which is pretty cool. I encourage some coaches maybe just to steal that from me if you want to learn how to do that. So we'll be back next week with that Business Center as well as the reporting that's available. Mike, anything else before we wrap it?
No, I just think it's great. I think it's just ironic, but it may be slightly intentional. The fact that it's what a great way to, I guess, conclude this series on with question number 12, learn and grow. And I think you struck the chord earlier, Jim, where love the dialogue, the feedback from the coaching community, love the way you sharpened thought and clarity around practical application advice, and just thank you and the coaches out there just for me to immerse myself in this. I think that's one of the things we all love about engagement itself is it's an ongoing opportunity that we should be learning and growing from. And gosh, just when you think you know a lot, you realize you know very, very little. And that's exciting because there's so much more. And I think that's why the conversations matter, right? Is it helps us make sense out of being okay and comfortable with the fact that we don't know everything, but man, what we do know is powerful and important. And it just pulls us forward into that next horizon. So it's been a great series. So thank you, honestly, for me individually for this opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah, no, it's been a great series. Hopefully, if we gave a Q12 assessment right now and you are answering that question for our series, you'd be able to give it a 5. And if not, I want to know why. So we'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. By the way, Mike, the coaches will always tell me why. I have no issues no issues knowing why.
It's a good feedback process. Is that what
there is a good feedback process in place. Yes, I do hear about that. If you have, if you like to be a guest blogger, you got some things to say around strengths, you want to send that to us, send us your blog post. We're looking for something original. 400 to 600 words is kind of where we're at. Coaching@gallup.com. Put guest blogger in the subject line. Those are always helpful to us. We're a little backed up at the moment, but that gives you some time to write. So maybe you'd like to do that as well. Always appreciate the feedback that you give us on these series. If you have any questions about it, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, got any questions, or those courses that are available, or actually access to your digital kit if you attended those courses, it's all available on our courses site. Just go to courses.gallup.com. We try not to make it too hard. Courses.gallup.com. You can sign in and get that information there, or sign up for the courses that are available. If you want to see all the webcasts that we have in the future, maybe you're listening to this, it's 2020 already, and you're like, what are they doing now? You can head out to our Eventbrite site, go to gallup.eventbrite.com, and that'll have all up-to-date webcasts and learning that's available for you. One thing, we just do a ton of learning here, so it's always available for you. Don't forget to join us on our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/called-to-coach. We'll get you there as well. Love to have you join the conversation. We'll do this again next week. Come back and join us for kind of the final, really, in the series as we get super practical next week. Mike, I think this is going to spur a season 2. I'm just going to say there will probably be a season 2 with you and I putting this together. We'll be back next week with it. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.